What if Iraq won the Gulf War? In 1918, with the end of the First World War, the Ottoman Empire would face partition, and though the Turks did drive the Entente out of Anatolia, East Thrace, and northern Kurdistan, they ultimately still gave up Hejaz, the Levant, and Mesopotamia. These lands would be split between the Allies, with the Hashemites getting Hejaz, France getting Syria and Greater Lebanon, and the United Kingdom taking Palestine, Transjordan, and Mesopotamia. In Mesopotamia, they would unite the majority Shia Arab Basra region, the majority Sunni Arab Baghdad region, and the majority Sunni Kurdish Mosul region into the Kingdom of Iraq, which, like Transjordan, would be led by one son of Hussein ibn al. In 1932, Iraq would be given independence from the United Kingdom, and just 1 year later King Faisal I would die and his son Ghazi I becomes king until he too dies in 1939, and his son Faisal II becomes king. Giving his young age, his uncle Abdullah would be from 1939 to 1941 and from 1941 to 1953 in charge as regent. On April 1, 1941, nationalist Salah al-Din al-Sabah would launch a coup with the help of the Axis powers, which caused an intervention by the United Kingdom, and the British forces didn't leave until 1947. In 1958, Iraq and Jordan, whose monarchs are cousins, merged into the so-called Arab Federation. But the same year, the Iraqi Revolution would see the dissolution of the monarchy and the formation of the Iraqi Republic under Abd al-Karim Qasim. In 1968, the Ba'athists, a pan-Arab socialist and anti-imperialist party, would overthrow the government, and their leader Ahmed Hassan al-Bakr would become fourth president of Iraq. His vice president Saddam Hussein would quickly center power within him, which was essentially completed in 1978 and 1979 when he used a conflict against a communist party to purge the Ba'athist party of his rivals, and he could just watch as his health declines and he loses his own power too. After making a name for himself by criticizing the Camp David Accords signed by Israeli Prime Minister Menachem Begin, Egyptian President Anwar Sadat, and American President Jimmy Carter, he made himself president of Iraq in 1979, a position he held until 2003 when the American-led coalition would invade Iraq and then depose and execute him. In 1979, something else happened, namely the Iranian Revolution, that saw the pro-American absolute monarch Reza Mohammad Pahlavi get ousted and replaced with an anti-American Islamist theocracy under Ruhollah Khomeini. Saddam Hussein was scared of this new Shia Islamist state and invaded Iran in 1980, as Iran was still weak, and in hopes of taking the majority Arab and oil-rich region of Khuzestan, which lays west of the Zagros Mountains. This war would last until 1988 and would be one brutal and disastrous trench warfare, and in the end the status quo returned. This war caused Iraq to be bankrupt, and so in order to increase Iraq's wealth, get oil fields and a proper coastline, Iraq invaded Kuwait in a swift invasion lasting one day in 1990. Kuwait then became a new state of Iraq, with the north going to al-Basra. The United Nations would respond with an ultimatum demanding Iraq to withdraw until January 15, 1991, and when Iraq didn't withdraw, all these countries invaded Iraq. Iraq, which had at this point the most powerful army in the Middle East and the third or fourth most powerful one, even having the biggest army in terms of soldiers, but after the invasion their army was a laughingstock at best, and they had to withdraw out of Kuwait for good. A no-fly zone would be placed on Iraq, and Palestinians in Kuwait would be expulsed. However, the government did remain in power, as George H.W. Bush was concerned that this could end up destabilizing Iraq, something his son wasn't all too concerned about when he invaded Iraq in 2003 because of so-called weapons of mass destruction. But what if that didn't happen? What if Iraq won the Gulf War? In this timeline, Iraq has somehow an even more powerful military than it had back then. Maybe Iraqi nationalists used a time machine to go back in time and give Saddam Hussein modern-day equipment, and maybe even nukes and other weapons of mass destruction. In this timeline, the Iraqi military completely crushes the coalition, and they would have to withdraw. Iraq then goes on the offensive and sees victories against the allies in Saudi Arabia, and soon later the country falls. It was then when the coalition sues for peace. Iraq not only keeps Kuwait, but also annexes Saudi Arabia, meaning they control 50% of all oil in the world. With the U.S. withdrawal out of the Gulf region, which is a consequence of the war, Iraq essentially has free reign supreme in the Gulf. Syria, Lebanon, Libya, and Sudan would freely join Iraq, though under pressure. Iraq would then change its name to the Republic of Arabia. Egypt, Oman, the United Arab Emirates, Qatar, Bahrain, Tunisia, Algeria, Morocco, Mauritania, Somalia, and Djibouti would form a military alliance to deter any further expansion of Saddam Hussein. In 2011, that war would finally happen when Arabia capitalized on the Egyptian crisis. The Ba'athist forces would quickly take over the Gulf states, Jordan, Somalia, and Djibouti, but would face problems in North Africa as Egyptian forces took over the Sudanese coastline and Benghazi while Tunisian and Algerian forces besieged Tripoli. The Ba'athists, however, took the League off guard when they landed in Sharm el-Sheikh. They would fight themselves up the Sinai Peninsula and manage to take it over. In 2012, they launched their spring offensive and capture Cairo and Alexandria, forcing Egypt to surrender. They link up with their Libyan and Sudanese forces. Tunisia, Algeria, Morocco, and Mauritania surrender by the end of the year, and with that, Arabia rules over all Arab states with Saddam Hussein as its president. The Republic of Arabia is one of the most powerful states in the world. It has a population higher than the United States, a land area bigger than Canada, and has a GDP higher than Canada. Its strength lays in its huge oil deposits, as they contain, with an oil production of 58 million barrels per day, 72.32% of all oil production. In 2022, with the crisis in Iran, Arabia would start the Arab-Iranian War. The war was even shorter as the Arabian War, as Iranian practice collapsed in on itself. Arabia annexes the region of Awaz. It contains many Arabs, but also other groups like Lurs or Persians, and it cuts Iran off of the Persian Gulf, now the Arabian Gulf. It also contains essentially all Iranian oil fields, meaning they now control 76.34% of all oil production. In Iran, the Islamist regime fell apart, and a new government takes over. The monarchy under Reza Pahlavi II would be restored, but he is just a powerless figurehead like the King of the United Kingdom. Iran would ally itself with the United States and stop supporting Russia in its war effort. Iran would have, like Israel, a huge American military presence. Arabia under Saddam Hussein would be hostile to the United States and Israel, and the only thing stopping them from invading Israel are American and Israeli nukes. However, Arabia would end up developing their own nukes as well, while Iran gets to build some with U.S. allowance. In 1992, George H.W. Bush loses even harder to Bill Clinton, who still serves 2 terms, followed by 2 Al Gore terms, 2 John McCain terms, and 2 Hillary Clinton terms. In 2026, Saddam Hussein dies, and his second oldest living son, Qasem Hussein, becomes second president of Arabia. In this timeline, Arabia is a global superpower that has a total monopoly over oil production, which gives it a lot of leverage of the global stage, and it is, with the US, Russia, and China, one of the 4 great powers. If you liked the episode, leave a like, and don't forget to subscribe. Goodbye.